ਫਿਰ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਪਿਘਲ ਜਾਇਆ ਕਰਨਗੇ. I'm sorry, when I recite poetry, you have to like go somewhere else and it's difficult.
It's not in your eyes.
Dildar.
Yeah. Dildar.
Dildar.
Always a Dildar. I'm
We're
wearing a
naming
necklace
this
that says
episode Dildar.
wearing a necklace that says Dildar.
Oh my God. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sher Vancouver Podcast. Today we have Guntaj Deep Singh here with us. Guntaj is born and raised in Punjab, India, and is a self-taught, interdisciplinary queer artist who nourishes his imagination through his passion for fusing art and poetry. His visual art, which focuses on both illustrations and photos, is produced through creating a blend of conventional and intuitive art techniques. His art aims to induce conversations around culture, parallelism, and the human condition. So without further ado, let's welcome Guntaj with us here today.
Hello, lovelies. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
It's a pleasure.
We're so excited to have Guntaj looking good today.
As usual.
As usual, yes.
As usual. You've seen Guntaj online with his beautiful photos.
Yes, he is a beauty.
That's why you're on the podcast,
Wow.
actually.
I love that.
Yes.
I mean, you know, as I was saying earlier, the only reason why I'm here is to look pretty.
And you're doing that.
I'm just kidding.
You do that everywhere you go, though. Every time I see you, you looking fly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? Here's the thing with beauty. I think it's subjective, right? And I really am a firm believer of the fact that beauty really does lie in the eyes of the beholder. So, yeah, all the tags and everything else aside or labels aside, I think the most important thing is to feel beautiful, you know? And then it just exudes on your face. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I
Well
like
put.
that. I like that. Confidence. So yeah, we had the pleasure of meeting Guntaj at both two Sher Vancouver events. One was the picnic. Guntaj rolled in, all looking fly, and we're like, oh my God, who is this?
Who's this cutie?
And then also we had the chance of seeing your mural at the Punjabi Market, which was so cool because, like, you know, we had the entire team there. Guntaj was in the zone. We gave him a little round of applause. And yeah, I think everyone from there was like, who is this guy? And look at the amazing mural you had made for the Punjabi Market. So we'd like to start off with that. Can you share about your art at the Punjabi Market, the mural, and yeah, just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, totally. Well, the mural project was one of the most, you know, amazing experiences of my life. And it just, you know, happened to me at the right time. It just seemed like everything was falling in place. And, you know, I was excited to work with the Punjabi Market Collective. And yeah, when the day that you guys visited me, like the whole Share team visited me, it was such a special day. I felt so special, you know, and at the end of the day, I think when you're an artist and you have the tendency to get lost in your own world so much, you know, when you're working on something, it was a 10-day process, right? So you're always by yourself and you're going at something, you live in a completely different almost dimension at that point, you know, you kind of have to cut off the regular world. So it's really nice when, you know, you have support and you have someone visit you. And obviously when the Share team visited me, it was indeed very special for me. So thank you for taking the time out, you know, to do that. And yeah, the mural itself was, I remember when we started the project, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was just kind of up in the air. And, you know, all I knew was that I was going to paint a mural. And we had this meeting with Mr. Tur, the owner of that building. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, everything is sort of in accordance with not exactly what he wants, but in the sense that he's not completely surprised when he sees the mural and he's not completely taken aback. And there's some sort of cohesion or some sort of seamlessness to the entire process. So I talked to him, yeah, and he told me that he wanted something traditional and he wanted something very, you know, sort of traditionally Punjabi. And yeah, after that I came up with the design and the sort of like the draft for it all. And yeah, I don't know. It was a very, very surreal experience for me. Yeah, I'd only done one mural before that, and it was also a temporary mural. So this experience was entirely different from that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll never forget it. It's one of those experiences which is like ingrained in my memory forever. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful mural. And you got to work alongside Jeg as well, from what I remember. I wasn't there, unfortunately, for that event, but I know Sharon was telling me it was a good turnout, and like everybody loved your artwork. And you're just such an amazing human being. Hence why you're here with us.
But that's really cool to know for listeners that the artist collaborated with the owners of the stores. You chatted with them. So all the artists did that for the Punjabi Market murals? Or?
I'm not 100% sure of that,
Okay.
but all owners did have to sort of approve, what was going on the walls
Yeah.
of the buildings that they owned,
Yeah.
So it was not exact. I don't know how much was shared and, how much was really revealed to by every artist to the, corresponding sort of person that they were in conversation with. But I wanted to make sure that, Mr. Toor is happy and that ultimately, it had to be a good balance of making sure that he's happy with what's on the wall, but also it has sort of like a more general sense of attraction to it, so that others can see it and also relate to what was on the wall and have a more, I would say, immersive experience with it when they, stood there and looked at the mural. So it wasn't just about that. So I wanted to find that good balance between making sure that it fulfilled both of those directions. Yeah.
Can you dig a little bit deeper as to like just explain your mural a bit better? I mean, sure people are going to have a look once they hear this or already have. Yeah, just give us a bit more depth on what you came up with.
Yeah. I remember being at home and just kind of being in a space where you're, brainstorming and you're like, what am I going to do? And, how detailed do I want it to be? It's a 10-day frame. Am I overestimating my capacity? Am I underestimating my capacity? It's this confusing space of just not exactly knowing what you're going to do. And to me, actually, uncertainty is one of the most beautiful things in life in general, So I have fun with that. I try to have fun with that. And then, I told myself, just go with your instincts and come up with a very quintessential Punjabi sort of grounded in this value of love and family and community, and also something that exuded the beauty of that time that's bygone. So there is something very like, it's not really something you see nowadays. If you look at the mural, even in rural Punjab, that scene is very rare, So it is a classic sort of Punjabi scene, really. And you'll see that sort of a thing in so many traditional Punjabi paintings as well. So yeah, I just came up with something, based off of my own memories, like going to my own Punjabi pind, back in Punjab, and just watching, my own grandparents live a certain type of life, which is so disconnected from the world that we live in now. So it was really dipped into a very nostalgic, romantic memoryscape of my mind. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. There was something very like utopian about it, I think, in a certain way, I guess. Yeah.
No, it was really beautiful, and I think like you touching on like it was like the landscape of Punjab, and just looking at it, it's like there was a manja there, and like what's the spinning thing called?
The spinning wheel, the charkha.
Yeah, the charka was there, and like the farmland in the back, and like you kind of felt that. Like for me, I didn't know about the Punjabi market that existed in Vancouver until really.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jag told me about it, and that's why we created the mural. Queer Punjabi tour to go see the Punjabi Market A, and I think with the murals that you all have painted is really bringing back that history, the culture that was once there, but now obviously we know it's moved to Surrey. But it's nice to learn about that because I moved here 2000. That was never my Punjabi Market. My Punjabi Market's always like Bio Business Center 128.
Right.
So it was really cool to learn about that.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I actually never thought of it like that, because when I moved here, I lived in the Punjabi Market area.
Okay.
Yeah, so my Punjabi Market was the Punjabi Market, you know. And yeah, I mean, in terms of bringing back a sense of culture and tradition, I think as times evolve, you can't deny the fact that, things change, culture changes, it shifts, and there's all of these things that happen, and you can't always hold on to a certain way of living, no matter how bad you want that. But I also think that there's a side of all inside of all of us which really badly wants to cling to that, like that simpler way of living, no matter how much we deny it, you know. So I feel like when people, at least I would want somebody to look at the mural and go back to that feeling of enjoying the little pleasures in life and really living in the moment, because I don't think that we get to see that a lot these days.
Yeah. I agree. And Punjabi Market really resonates with me because I grew up going shopping there with my parents, and like I still think of it as like the Punjabi Market. I live in East Van, so like even like I went to go get a suit like last week, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll go to Surrey. And then my mom's like, oh, let's go to like Main Street. And I was like, oh, I'm like, but I don't know if there's even like many shops there to like get suits or like have the selection and so forth, because I know a lot of people have moved out to Surrey, right, for their Indian suit shopping, restaurants and so forth and whatnot. But I think there's so much history there. That's pretty much where everybody kind of settled, a lot of the South Asian community, right? Back in the day, and even now that still heavily exists out there, which is nice. And I know Jag has shared a few stories of getting to know the shop owners and hearing their stories as well. So that's really nice, and I'm so like glad that they were able to put that artwork within like the old school Punjabi Market, you know. So it's
and
a really
the shop owners were so excited to see us. I remember the tour, like one of the uncles in like the convenience store one. I'm not sure what's the
Punjab Food Center.
Maybe, yeah. He was like, "Oh, what are you guys all doing here?" Just so happy to see like young folks like our age coming through to the Punjabi Market. And then they made the audio tour. I think Jag worked on that with the Punjabi Market Collective. And yeah, I don't know if that's still available for people to listen to.
The audio tour, I'm pretty sure it still is, because you just simply need to scan a QR code. And once you scan the QR code, you directly get taken to this link where you can hear about the history of the market, and you can also, it's kind of like a guided tour really. So you begin at a point and then you walk, and then it as it unfolds, it really sort of explains how the market evolved and what it has gone through and everything. So I casually just walked into the store, which was right next to the Himalaya restaurant. I think it was called the Pabla Trading Center. And the lady in the store, she showed me all these art pieces, which were like hand painted on fabrics that they'd sourced from Delhi, like ages ago, So they were really old, and they had this old school charm about them, And I'm just all about that. I live for. I
was gonna say, how excited were you?
Yeah, I was very excited. There's a side of me which unnecessarily romanticizes the past, but I've made peace with it now, and I'm like, that's who you are. So just make peace with it. Stop trying to fight it, because I used to think I have to fight that feeling. Where I'm trying to like romanticize the past in a certain way.
Yeah, but I feel like that's how people connect, right? Is when you think like, for nostalgia, for me, like when things get like torn down and areas get like gentrified, I'm like, no, like I'm like, that has so many memories. I relate to it so much. Like it gives me a certain feeling. So yeah, you having that feeling when you see art or whatever it may be, for feeling like you're back home, that's such a normal feeling, and it's a great feeling. And I miss it sometimes when I see areas that I've been to, and I'm like, damn it, they put a gosh darn it like strip mall here, and I'm like, why did they do that? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of when they do that kind of stuff myself, because I'm like, there's so many memories. They should like close down a 7-Eleven that has been there since I was a kid, and I was so sad. I was like, dang it, and it ain't coming back.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of redundant when they close something or shut something down, something that's very specific in terms of experience and has a beauty to it, to do something more commercial, obviously. So yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking when that happens, but yeah.
100%. I know we definitely went off track with a lot of questions here, but that's okay. But what I wanted to talk to you about as well is like how you kind of started doing oil paintings, and even just your love for art, where that came from. Tell us a bit of your story and your journey.
So when it comes to art, I actually don't specifically just do oil paintings. If anything, my level of finesse when it comes to oil paintings is actually very intermediate or like lower intermediate. So, as you were, saying in the beginning, a lot of my work is a blend of like a conventional technique, like also an intuitive, more sort of liberating technique. So, because I never went to art school, I just kind of do what I've taught myself along the way, along with having room for an uncertain process where I'll be like, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to approach this project, but I kind of make a picture in my mind and, I go with it. So yeah, I'm not an expert at oil painting by any means at
But
all.
you're so good.
Thank you. But yeah, I don't really stick to oil paints specifically. So my visual art is like a mixed media, really. I like taking pictures. I like expressing through photographs. I like sketching illustrations. Sometimes I like picking up oil paints because I think they have a very specific feel to them, and they just can elevate an art piece to a whole another level. And I think there's something like very traditional and very aristocratic about oil paints, right? Like all the great painters would always use oil paint. So there's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when I pick up oil paints where I'm like, I'm an artist, But yeah, I like making art in a more flexible way.
Yeah.
And that's why I describe it the way I describe it. It's very interdisciplinary. It's very flexible, and it's more so to do with a certain space of mind. And through what I create, I do like inducing conversations around, culture, and also how human beings in general are so similar, but like yet so different. So there's like this parallel that we see anywhere we go, right? Like you could be here, you could be in India, you could be in Africa, you could be, I don't know, in Pakistan, but I guess we all live our lives in a very certain way, and there's so much similarity in it, but we forget that in our own existence. Somehow we forget how similar we all are. So I like inducing that conversation through my artwork. And then I just like questioning like existence in general. Like I think everybody on a daily basis, or I would love to think so or believe so, that everyone has moments of like, what am I really doing here?
All the time.
Yeah.
What's our purpose?
Yeah,
All
all
that
that,
kind
the
of stuff,
bigger
right?
questions.
Yeah.
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 So I think it's very important for me that I incorporate that element in my artwork as well, where if you're looking at something that I've made, I want you to question that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really resonates with your art. Yeah, you get really deep with it, and I like that you've explained to our audience as well, like how you kind of get there, and it's very like how you're feeling, and you kind of go in with, obviously every artist goes in with a blank canvas, but your thoughts, like what are your inspirations behind some of your artwork? Like what inspires you? Like what's your passion behind it?
You know, there's this addicting sort of element to the way I approach art. I don't know if it's healthy or not, but I didn't start taking art in the direction that I'm going in right now up until like 2019, 18, when I had moved to Canada, and, I didn't really make art for a specific reason. I remember back then I was just making art and it was nice, it was therapeutic. I was here by myself. I was going through like a very tormented phase of my life. I had fallen in love with someone and gotten my heart broken really bad, and all that, good stuff
You
that
let it all
leads
out
to
in your painting?
that's
Okay.
basically how it started. It's almost cliche in a certain way, where people are like, his heart got broken, so he started making art, or something like that. But it's true, and I can't deny it. I can't deny the fact that there was a huge part of me which wanted to just express myself after I'd gone through that experience somehow, and I didn't want to. There was part of me which was hesitant of talking about it with anyone, and I think sometimes I know that we should go talk to someone about our feelings, but I also know that there's a healthy aspect to maybe keeping some things to yourself and dealing with them yourself as well. I think it's a very fine line, So I think I got to the point where I wanted to express myself through art, and that's how it sort of began. And one thing led to another. I ended up, being part of different projects, and just not even necessarily projects, just, some friends or someone that I just recently met would ask me to like paint something for them. And it turned into this thing where I was like, I have the ability to touch lives through this. This is not just me painting or like putting something on a paper and calling it art. This is more than that. And once I had that realization, I think it became kind of addicting.
Yeah.
And that's how I started, making more and more art. And inspiration wise, I think a lot of my inspiration comes from just regular, like everyday, mundane sort of things, really. Like, a lot of my inspiration comes from something very random and mundane, like I'd be listening to a song or something, and I'd be making like, I don't know, I'd be cooking or something. I could have something pop up in my mind. And I think obviously I'm reducing it to a very generic vocabulary, but I think when you're an artist and it's always on your mind, you subconsciously end up collecting these experiences in your mind that you want to remember almost on purpose. You deliberately want to remind yourself of all the experiences that you've been through or anything that sort of sticks with you. And then you want to use that as a source of your inspiration. So it's really hard to describe as like one specific thing. I think I just like the fact that we exist, and I just like the fact that we are able to experience all these different things around us. And I find beauty in something very simple like this cup, for example, so this could be my inspiration. Yeah, I think it's a big deal that I'm able to pick this up and sip my coffee and have that experience, so it's the complete randomness of the fact that we exist. It's the complete randomness of the fact that I have the opportunity to make whatever I want. I don't think it gets any better than that in terms of inspiration. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
We went deep there. Hey, I love it though, but that's.
But I had to
that's
tell
really
you
cool.
it in the most honest possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. And I think just going back to what you're saying, like your art is kind of, it's like you want to have people connect in a way that where everybody relates. And how I see it is like we're all human and we all go through experiences. And so art is such an amazing expression for yourself to be able to put that on the canvas or a mural wall, whatever it may be, and have that resonate with many, many people from around the world. I'm sure people are going to think of your art and be like, oh yeah, I remember that piece. And like it reminded me of Punjab, or it reminded me of, even something back home from a different country, right? Just the connection point. So I think art connects a lot of people, and your artwork especially, because you are such a deep man. But I love
I'd
it.
love
You're
to
very
believe
expressive.
that.
Yeah, you're very expressive, and I like that.
Yeah,
really, really like that.
you know what? After all these years, after living for 27 years now, I don't think I'm at a point in my life where I want to hold back on how I feel, and I kind of want to be unapologetic about my feelings.
As you
So
should.
yeah,
As
yeah,
you should.
yeah.
That's why we're here, right? We're
Yeah.
here to like unleash and unravel. And yeah, you're doing great.
I think like you touching on like your inspiration, when we've seen you paint live, there is like a certain zone you've gone in. Like I've seen you paint at the Punjabi Market mural, and then also they had like a event you were
The
painting.
Market Plaza event.
Yeah, the Market Plaza. And
Yeah.
I remember you were like in a zone, like you were painting, you stepped back, tilting your head side to side. Can you talk about that? Like the little zone that you get in when you're painting? Because I know there's different zones we can get in when we're doing different things. Like for me, mine is dancing. I'll get in a zone where I don't even know, but I feel so good. So I
Right.
kind of relate to the part where like I don't necessarily feel so open to talk about all my feelings, but when I go through something, I'll like go dance in my room for like 2 hours, and my family knows not to bother me.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd love to know like what does your zone look like for painting?
Wow. That's a very good question. So I think a lot of the times when I make any form of art, I tend to go into this I don't even know how to sort of articulate it, but I'll try my best. I tend to go into this very melancholic phase I've always been a very melancholic person. And again, something that I've stopped fighting. I've accepted the fact that I am a melancholic person, and that I'm always going to have a streak inside of me that looks at the world like that. So whenever I make art, I end up going into that phase. And there isn't necessarily anything specific, I would say, that sort of shifts in me, but yeah, there is definitely that melancholic element there. That's only that's one main thing that I can think of. And you know what? I don't know if somebody else will relate to this, but I also end up visually and like in terms of what's around me, everything else becomes very, very, very poetic. You know what I mean? So I have to put myself in that poetic mode. Every little thing becomes poetic for me if I'm making art. So if somebody's having a conversation, or if somebody's looking at the sky, or anything, I will make sure that becomes a part of my experience. Yeah, so it's just that, really. And it's this like, you can't deny the fact that human beings always have a very strong thirst for finding meaning in things, and it's a collective experience. We're all having this collective experience where we want meaning so bad. So in that moment, I try to find meaning in every little possible thing around me. So that's my zone, quote unquote. Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we know you love poetry because we see it online and the Punjabi poetry coming through. And
I can't live without poetry. I can't. More than I write, I actually read poetry. And I think that's how it becomes a part of the process.
And you kind of mesh both worlds into your art.
That's what I meant when I said everything becomes so poetic.
Yeah.
And I have to, you know what, I don't even try at that point. As soon as I get into that zone, I think the poetic feelings or the poetry of life automatically translates into the artwork that you make, because you're in that zone, And if it wasn't for poetry, I genuinely would not be where I am in my life. I think a huge part of my journey and sort of the credit for it goes to the poets of Punjab and whatever they wrote. And
wow.
Yeah,
Just
it
curious.
changed my life. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
curious, who are some of your favorite poets from India?
Well, one of my favorite poets of all time is Shiv Kumar Batalvi. He was born and raised in Batala in Punjab, and he became at a very young age. He sort of became the face of Punjabi poetry, especially during that era that he was writing poetry in, and he was I think he's one of the only poets in Punjab who really could write about life and about the pain of existence but he would often write actually from a woman's perspective. Yeah. So it was a very life-changing experience to read him. And other than that, in terms of poetry, I really like some poets from Pakistan as well, from Pakistan, Punjab. Afzal Hassan Randhawa was great. He was amazing. Munir Niazi is one of my favorite poets as well of all time. Yeah, and the one thing that they all share is that they have always been extremely expressive in terms of whatever they write, and they don't shy away from the feelings of like sadness or pain or sort of unrequited love, and the constant sort of tormentation that comes with it. Tormentation, is that even a word?
Yes.
Torment that comes with it, I guess. So yeah, they are all great. And then Amrita Pritam, she sometimes wrote poetry, but she wrote a lot of fiction as well. Was also one of the people that has hugely impacted me, and sort of brought me in touch with the poetic side of life.
I think just learning about like famous Punjabi men poet writers in Punjab is just like such a big shock, I guess, maybe for me, like because in Punjabi culture men are very like non-expressive. So you're talking about like they're talking about their feelings and things like that. That must have been really healing to find that.
Yeah, Shiv Kumar did that a lot, where
Yeah.
he wrote about, the pain of just, being a woman in love, or um, woman in love who couldn't fulfill her love in a way, I guess. He wrote about being a mother, so yeah, he wrote
Oh.
a lot, and his work is phenomenal. It's life changing if you read it and you'll sort of let it sink in. And yeah, and other than that, there's just been so many different I make sure that I'm constantly reading poetry, and that I never go out of touch with it, because once I do that, I'm not in the same zone anymore, so I have to really be in that mode, even in general too. And sometimes it does affect other areas of my life, because when you're surrounded with so much poetry, you make every little thing poetic.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be annoying for people that are around you, and they're like, you're just having tea. Stop. This is not supposed to be that romantic.
You're like stopping people as they're doing things. You're like, your brown eyes.
Yeah.
I couldn't even follow through with that, so I'll
Oh
stop.
my
But I mean,
God.
I'm
You
sure
know what I
can.
mean,
I know
though?
what you mean.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. I know we're gonna ask probably an awkward question, but do you want to spit some poetry out to us? Because I know you write it, and we'd love to hear it and share it with the audience as well. If you're comfortable, if you're not.
Let me think about it. Poetry. Okay. It's in Punjabi. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
FYI, I did not write this. I came across it somewhere, but I don't know who the author is. So, one of those things where you read something and you're like, who wrote this?
Yeah.
So, if somebody who's listening to this podcast and they've read this somewhere and they know who wrote it, let me know. So, it goes like this. ਜਦ ਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ ਮੂਰੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਸਜਾਇਆ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਯਾਦ ਪੋਟੇ ਮੇਰੀਆਂ ਉਂਗਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਇਆ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਬਣ ਸੰਵਰ ਕੇ ਵੇਖਣਗੇ ਜਦ ਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਖੁਦ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਇਕੱਲੇ, ਫਿਰ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਪਿਘਲ ਜਾਇਆ ਕਰਨਗੇ. I'm sorry, when I recite poetry, you have to go somewhere else, and it's difficult. But yeah, so it says, Jad kade o shishe mure phul sajaya karenge means, so it's coming from a person who is trying to sort of make peace with the fact that their lover is not a part of their life anymore, and that they're gone, and they're trying to sort of put themselves together, and they're trying to convince themselves that they will remember them as also. When your lover has left and you're like, do they miss me? That sort of it's coming from that perspective. So they say, Jad kade o shishe mure phul sajaya karenge, whenever that person will put some flowers in front of a mirror, and in a vase. Yaad pote meriyan unglan de aaya karenge, they'll remember my fingertips. And then they say, ਬਣ ਸੰਵਰ ਕੇ ਵੇਖਣਗੇ ਜਦ ਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਖੁਦ ਨੂੰ ਇਕੱਲੇ. So when they dress up and they look at themselves in that mirror, ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਪਿਘਲ ਜਾਇਆ ਕਰਨਗੇ. They'll see me in the mirror instead of themselves. So it's like it's like one of those things where you wish that they think like that.
that was real good. I felt chills when you were saying that. And even
It's
explaining
difficult
it.
reciting poetry like this, but this is the only piece that came to me right now. So
It sounded
No,
so
it's
beautiful
lovely.
in Punjabi too.
yeah, it has a rhythm to it, right?
Yeah.
So whoever wrote it has just done really well. But yeah, that's my favorite kind of poetry that sort of gets your blood flowing
100%.
and your
Feeling
heart
a lot.
beats faster. Yeah.
So
Yes.
Guntaj is the first and only open mic sign up. There's going to be a whole night dedicated to you and your Punjabi. I'm down. You
It's
down?
poetry night with Guntaj.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
We'd like to go back to your art, and we talked about you moving here 2017, and it's really opened up the art scene for you here in Vancouver. Can you talk about how that sort of came about, and who are you collaborating with now?
Yeah, I moved to Vancouver in pretty much 2018, like December 2017, life has taken me into so many different places and, so many different environments. And the experience has been something that I'll just always keep with me, I feel like I'm at that point in my life right now where I'm trying to gauge where I see myself in like the next decade, I guess, in terms of like geographically where I see myself. So I'm definitely jumping between, different states of minds with that. But in terms of art and in terms of the collaborations that I have going on right now, there's one that I did with 5X Festival. Like, it wasn't really a collaboration with the 5X Festival. We were doing an artist in residence program with them.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I ended up collaborating with other folks during my project because it was a photography project. So I reached out to, a lot of friends that I've made along the way and folks that I wanted to capture. It was a very specific series of photos. So I wanted to make sure that everyone who's on board is, one, comfortable with it, sort of expressing themselves like that, because it's kind of intimate, but not in like a provocative way, although I would have loved for it to be provocative, but I think it was too soon for me to be a provocateur in my life. So I decided to, although I've always been one in a certain way,
Mary told me you had asked her for a photo shoot.
I
Is
did.
this going to be the provocative?
No, I mean, if
I
Neri's
wish.
down for,
I'm like,
if Neri's down for being provocative on camera, I'm totally cool with that.
I'm a behind the scenes kind of gal, so just saying.
Yeah, I like that art can be kind of provocative sometimes,
So you
but-
also take photos? Is that what you're saying? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. But I've always taken photos, but I've never really put them out there.
Okay.
But I've used them for some of my art pieces in the past. So yeah, I'm trying to blend it more into my visual art as well. But yeah, this was my first real photography project in the sense that I sort of, was working with so many different people, and I wanted to capture a very, everyone has an essence, that comes through when you put them in a certain kind of space. So I wanted to do that with folks that I know, and I wanted to make sure that I capture that beautiful side of, all these people. And there was sort of like a storytelling side to it all. I don't want to reveal too much because it's going to be at 5X Festival. So I hope that, you'll be coming there and seeing the photos. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
This is the one in June, right? Is there a
This-
specific date for the art?
June 13 from what I remember.
I believe so,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's the Wednesday event, I believe.
I
Could
think
be
it's
wrong.
June 13. I'm like pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So much to look
So
forward to.
yeah, that's the only current project that I have going on, and then we'll see what happens in the future. Yeah.
Who would you want to be collaborating with? In like maybe in Vancouver or wherever. We're just curious as well to see like where your vibe's at, who you're thinking in your mind, like some of your favorite artists that you're like, you know what, I need to, like, I want to connect with them. Like, I think our work would gel,
I've been thinking a lot about collaboration, and I haven't really fully reached a conclusion as of now. In the past, I collaborated with Jesse Sopal, who is a Vancouver-based artist. I love his work. I've always loved his work. I think he just has this way of making simple things look very beautiful, So it's very minimal what he does, but it just speaks a lot. So I collaborated with him on a film where I was,
right?
Coming Home,
Coming Home, yes.
Yeah, so I was the actor on it, and that was a whole different experience too. So I think if I collaborate in the future, I think it might have to do with like film, and it might have to do with like performance art. I don't think I see myself collaborating anytime soon in terms of like solely visual, like technique-based art in that sense with anyone as of now. I think I kind of want to go solo there. In terms of collaborations, I think I see myself doing like film work, and I love being able to express through acting, So yeah, hopefully I'll get to be part of some projects in the future. I already have some ideas, floating in my mind in that sense. Yeah. Talking about acting, I forgot to tell you, one of my biggest inspirations in general is like cinema. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know to all the listeners out there.
Yeah.
Y'all know where to go.
Can't live without cinema. Another thing that I can't live without. But yeah.
So it's been really good for you. Would you say in the move here for your art sort of passion to move forward compared to Punjab? Would you say the Vancouver scene has been very welcoming and open to you?
Absolutely.
That's good, yeah.
I think there was almost this, because when I was moving to Vancouver, it was not supposed to be like a planned, I'm moving to Vancouver because Vancouver has this to offer thing at all.
Okay.
It was a very impulsive sort of, I need to get out of India type of decision. And I think my bubble was very small, like the bubble that I was living in India. So there was this impulse that was pushing me to just like, go somewhere and do something. So I think I just made this massive decision of just leaving the country when it didn't have to be that dramatic, but it ended up being that dramatic. So now that I look back at it, I feel like even if it was accidental in a certain way, Vancouver has just brought so much in my life that I'll be forever grateful for. The experiences have been just, I lack the words to really sort of, because of how random it all was. I was just here and I'm like, we'll see. We'll see what life brings,
Yeah.
So that's why I've fallen in love with the uncertainty of life and that way of living. Yeah.
And that's so brave. I think talking with other like queer folks as well, moving to Vancouver has been a very like big change for them, and surprisingly it has been very welcoming and accepting. Like talking to Angit and Josh, now they moved from the UK here as well, just picked up, and they were like, okay, we gotta go, we want to be free and more in our space. So that's really nice to hear that Vancouver in the art scene and every other scene has been welcoming and open for you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll forever be grateful for it. It's been an experience that has changed me forever, as a human being. And if and when, I don't know, if I ever end up like not living here, I think whatever I take from here will be like a huge part of, whatever I end up being. Because I've spent the last almost 5 years here, and I haven't really traveled too much during that time because there's a lot to do when you're an immigrant. And yeah, it has become a huge part of who I am, Yeah, people I've met, experiences, art collaborations, conversations, movies, everything. It's something even as random as like bumping into a stranger on the street. Like I have so many of those, that led to something. So
Wow.
yeah, Vancouver is magical like that. Yeah.
That's so interesting to hear that, because a lot of people that I know that have moved here from abroad or whatnot, not a lot of people, but I'd say a decent amount. I'm born and raised in Vancouver, so I have a decent amount of a group of friends and whatnot, but people that I know that are not from here, they've always told me that Vancouver's not welcoming so much. So in meeting people, making friends, that people are quite cold here. So when I hear that coming from you, I'm like, oh, that's like such a different experience I've heard from the rest. And that's so great to hear. And I want to hear that change, and I want to hear that things are changing here, and I do see that there's like some groups that are allowing that to happen, like just random people meeting up to like actually build a base of friends here. So, and then you're just saying like meeting people randomly on the street, like that's awesome. That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I get that experiences they can vary, right? And I understand that sometimes a city can be like kind of brutal in that aspect. At the end of the day, like city life is city life. A lot of the times you don't even have time to really take time out for a genuine connection. And I can't deny that I've been through that. Like, yeah, I've had days where I felt like I was having a hard time really connecting with someone. But in the bigger picture, I think I have a more positive experience as compared to negative. I think the positive really sort of outweighs the negative for me when it comes to my experience in Vancouver. And then I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that I'm such a homebody. So I'm okay with being at home alone and doing my own thing, I think sometimes that can be a very, I don't know, not a common experience, or maybe it is, I don't know. But yeah, for me, it has outweighed, the positive has outweighed the negative. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. Guntaj, we wanted to talk about you're having a positive experience here. We want to talk about queerness. How has the move been here, and what do you miss maybe about it at home, or what do you want to see changed either culturally here or in Punjab in regards to queerness and sort of just like all of us being here, being ourselves? Like, what are some changes you'd like to see?
I just think that it's still a work in progress, right? And in terms of cultural sort of body of queerness and how that has shifted and how it's forever changing, how culture is just in general forever shifting. I think we just need to have that in the back of our minds. I think a lot of the times when it comes to being queer, not just necessarily talking about Vancouver or Punjab, this is just in general, I'm saying that when it comes to being queer, I think there's this expectation, or there's this sort of we all as a community sometimes want to get to a point where we see ourselves somewhere, collectively. Like, we want to have quote unquote equal say in things, quote unquote equal amount of contribution to different spaces, decisions, and so and so. So I think sometimes in the midst of that, we get lost a little bit. And I think we need to start focusing more on the fact that the world is changing, and being queer is definitely something that I feel like I'm going to go off a tangent here. But yeah, it becomes a huge part of your personality and your identity, right? Because you've constantly dealt with so many struggles in your life, and then you're like, how do I deal with this in the real world, and how do I navigate all these different spaces? But yeah, in general, I think culturally we just need to remind ourselves that the world is changing. We need these affirmations, and they're not just like sort of faux affirmations of like, yes, we will, we have this space, or like we have a say, or the world is equal. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is happening though, and I think we need to start looking at that more. But as long as I just feel like I'm such an idealist, and I always try to paint the world in this picture, where everything's perfect and there's no war, there's no this, there's no that, So being queer has always been connected to some sort of like a systemic war. You're always kind of fighting for something. And I feel like I don't want that anymore. I don't want to fight for anything just because I'm queer. And I don't want to make a point either. Like, if I'm going into a space, I don't necessarily want to be like, well, I'm queer, so I need to be, this or that, But obviously that's a very utopian viewpoint, because we can't deny the fact that there is still a lot of struggle happening in the queer community, But so I find myself torn between this, like, should I be fighting for a cause, or should I just be existing in the most unapologetic possible way and making that in itself a statement, But yeah, I try to stand up for, the queer right movement, sort of, yeah.
I think you are, just like you said, you're being unapologetically yourself. Your artwork is there. It's not like you're hiding it. But yeah, Neri and I sort of are on the similar journey. It's like we're tired of sort of fighting, but we recognize that it is our reality, but also recognizing that many people have paved the path for us to get to this point.
That's true.
And we're lucky to be in Vancouver, but I also so surprised with how progressive Punjab and India are with the queer rights. Like, to see the Chandigarh had a pride parade, and to me that's like, wow, really? Because my first time going to India was 2017, and I can't even picture that space can exist. So I think we're lucky to be here in Vancouver. We're not constantly fighting, but yeah, it's like sometimes I would ask oh, why me, right? And then I started reading books, and then they say to rephrase it, why not me? Why not us to be queer and to do what we're just doing? Either just living like Jag says, I'm not doing anything, I'm just being myself. And I was like, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant too. Because I don't think that we need to put up a fight anymore. I genuinely don't believe that. I think instead we should just sort of be coexisting. And obviously, when there's a movement or there's a revolution in any way, there's a very utopian perspective that sort of becomes the seed of that movement, because we want this world where everything is just perfect, but we forget that that's just, in a very realistic way, not possible. So instead of trying to convince someone that we have these rights or this or that, we should just live like that, so that we don't even have to explain, or we don't even have to go beyond, a certain type of I would say putting up a face, or like being a rebel, or whatever you want to call it. We don't need to go there, I think. But yeah, it's easier said than done, because when you see the struggle, then, I know that India and Punjab and all these other places are progressing, and with all this expression on social media, pop culture, even cinema is changing, literary work is changing, everything is changing, and you see a lot of representation, and I think that's great. But I hate the word representation, I feel like we don't need representation. We just need to be a part of the culture, period, So, yeah.
It just needs to be normalized. And like we said before, it's just being human. We're all humans. We all bleed the same blood. We all breathe the same air. And that's it. I don't need to justify who I am or what my sexual orientation, if you want to call it, I'm just me, and I exist in this world. And yeah, I want everybody to be happy about it, and when we say we battle and we struggle to get that, I mean, I'm still very closeted as well. And there's still so much fear instilled of releasing that information, because people have only known me as a hetero woman, cis woman, right? But there's so much cultural backlash bullshit that's in my mind, so.
I mean, we grew up with it, Neri. So, the amount of years that we spend with this internal sort of toxic narrative that we feed ourselves is insane. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about how absolutely sort of mind-boggling it is that once we become adults, there's this expectation of just being completely okay with everything, and forget about whatever you've grown up with, So I think that's a good point, in the sense that we still need a certain type of underlying movement, yes, because there are so many more people who haven't even gotten to the point where they're past that stage. They're still just telling themselves something is very wrong with me, and all of that. So how do you bring that change? That's the reason why it's important to make art that sort of speaks for it, or make movies, or have something that
have a podcast and
have a
share
podcast
stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
Poetry.
And also for others who can afford to live unapologetically without putting their lives in danger.
Yeah, to have that privilege.
To have that privilege,
100%.
So I recognize that I have that privilege, and I try to use it in the way where I'm able to impact lives positively, even if it's just I know it's going to sound very I guess minuscule, but sometimes even when I make a post on Instagram, right, I'll try to make sure that it has something to say, or it can touch even if one person, I think self-expression goes a long way, and I'm very blessed and privileged to be able to live that life,
Really cool.
Yeah.
So you're intentionally putting out information versus just putting it out right on your Instagram, and I know you have a website called Dildara. What is it? Dildar Kalakana?
My website is actually Guntajdeepsingh.com.
Okay. Yeah.
But I use the phrase, or you can say the terms, Dildar Kalakar. I feel like those are the two words that sort of encompass my personality, or kind of it's a very simplified way of encapsulating who I am. So Dildar is a Punjabi word. It's my favorite word of all time.
Should we
Dildar.
just call you that?
You could honestly call me Dildar. I would never mind at all. I think it's just so beautiful. If I ever have a child, male, female, I don't care. I'll name them Dildar. I think it has a very beautiful sound to it. And Dildar basically is someone who lives for lives for love, somebody who goes into a space and has one intention, which is to like take love out of that experience and not just like squeeze it out for themselves, but also have it, there for others. So there's this like reciprocative nature to that. But yeah, being a dildar is also being open, just being open to any experiences, open to conversations. Yeah, you'll often hear people say, "Oh, dildar banda aa gaya," He's such a dildar, Yeah.
That is so you. That's
Yeah.
the perfect name.
It's the perfect name for your
Thank
future
you.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you.
So dildar kalakar, and then kalakar means an artist, Yeah, so I went with those two terms because they really spoke to me. I use them often. Sometimes I sign my artwork with that,
Cool.
Yeah.
And is that where people can go to find your artwork? Like, where can people go to follow you, support you, buy your art, or even see your future collaborations?
Yeah, everything. I'm in the midst of updating my website right now, but it's still got a lot of my artwork on there. So if someone does want to go check out, everything that I've done, there's a lot there. I've put on some like performance art there as well from the Punjabi Market Plaza event that I'd done. There's some illustrations and paintings. There's some photos. I'll update it soon though with more work. I haven't done that. I've been a little bit lazy lately. And other than that, you can also go follow me on Instagram. Guntaj Deep Singh is my username. And my Instagram is a more authentic expression of like my melancholic, aka the Divana side, I guess,
We see you.
Yeah. That avara. I don't want to. A lot of my friends sometimes call me Dukhi Atma. They're like, "You're such a Dukhi Atma." I'm like, I get it though. Like I have a very melancholic expression on Instagram, so yeah. But I like to keep it authentic. I share some of my artwork there. I share my own photos there. I like taking selfies.
I see you. I see you in your tank top.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, I think even something as small as taking a selfie can become a work of art, if you look at it that way. We live in a culture, where like, at the end of the day, like social media has a side to it, which is very like, what's the word for it? Self-centered in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And I've had a very unhealthy relationship with social media, but I finally gotten to a point where I'm like, I don't need to have this explanation for myself to be able to express myself, if I want to take a photo of my face, I'll take a photo of my face and I'll post it. I don't think too much about it.
Yeah.
And if I need to post my artwork, I'll do that. Yeah. So Instagram is less professional. Website is more my artwork. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, because we're coming to an end, we always like to have a little fun question at the end. So we just kind of started this. But our question that we want to ask you, are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? I feel like we can probably talk an hour about it. So I'll just shoot to the question. But
Okay.
What would be your ideal world?
My ideal world would be a world where nobody's fighting for having the most bare minimum of existence, like having the most like simple way of living. I see people fight for the most like simple things. Being able to love someone, for example, is one of them. So yeah, I think my ideal world would be where there's less conflict in the world. And I say the word less conflict because I know conflicts will never go away. That's just human nature. So I've learned to make peace with that as well. But I just hope that we can get to a point where human beings have enough respect for each other that they allow anyone that they know, or as many people as they know, to have experiences that are fulfilling and don't make anyone feel like they deserve to not live a certain type of life. That's my ideal world. I don't know if that was articulated well, but that movie Mean Girls.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You know how in that movie, towards the end, I think, there's this scene where they're doing this thing where everyone's talking about their like, they're sort of apologizing for things and they're saying, I'm sorry that I hurt you and I'm sorry that I did this and that. And there's this girl who doesn't even go to that school. She's like crying and she's like, I just want everyone to be happy and like, I hope that we could bake rainbow cookies or something. So I basically am coming from that place. But obviously she's very, very, very out of touch with reality and like she's very utopian. And nothing wrong with that. I think we need people who have a utopian perspective, who have this larger than life perspective on like how positive our future can look. Because if we don't have that, then, you know, we might as well just stop trying, you know. So I hope that we can get to that point one day as a species where we're not bothered by someone's choices and lives. Yeah. As long as it's not hurting anybody, right? Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us on this amazing podcast journey.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.